What's going on, guys? Marcus here, back in the shop, and the long-awaited documentary 2 was finally released this morning, and I told you guys I was going to review it when it came out, not during the leak. I'm actually a fan, like I've said before. If you've been following me in my last couple videos, I told you that I wanted to wait to review it when the album came out legally so I can actually listen to it and then give you the review that you guys deserve. So here it is. Oh, and side note, I swear, I promise you, it's just a coincidence that I'm wearing a red t-shirt to a game review. I promise you it's just a coincidence. But on to the review.
Something new. Stop, drop, shut 'em down, open up shop. Oh, no.
So, as we all know, the documentary 2 was pushed back numerous times. In one of my last videos, I mentioned that the original release date was September 25th. That was actually false. I believe the original release date was back in January 15th, 2015. So damn near a year ago is when he promised this album for us. But as you guys all know, it's a double disc, and disc 1, this one right here, was just released this morning. So if you haven't seen my last video where I do an unpackaging, I'll leave like a little annotation here somewhere of me going to pick up this album. As you guys know, I have numerous albums here from back in the day when I guess it was still cool to still buy CDs and stuff before all the streaming and YouTube, and iTunes and stuff. But this is actually like my first album that I've bought in years, like I said before. So if you haven't watched that video, I'll put it right here and I suggest to watch. It's actually pretty fun. And if you haven't seen my my review for the original documentary, I'll put that somewhere in the link below as well. So check that out if you have not heard the album. If you have not seen it, you might want to check that out so you can watch this one and it'll make a little more sense to you. The reason being is because, as we know, this is a continuation. It's a part 2 from the original album that was released 10 years ago. So I definitely wanted to, to touch back on certain things that have, 1, changed in the rap game, and 2, things that happened to Game during the time of the original documentary, with the feud with 50 and G-Unit, and just pretty much stuff that was going on in his personal life and his upbringing compared to where he's at now. So with that being said, the documentary 2 pretty much takes us back into the essence of Game's arrival to the hip-hop game. To, no pun intended, to pretty much just the raw grittiness of South Central Compton. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have that Dr. Dre feel like the documentary did, because this album was obviously not produced by Dr. Dre, and as we all know, none of his music has really been majorly produced from Dr. Dre in years since the first album, because of obvious reasons with his departure with Aftermath and Interscope Records and all that. But he still kept the West Coast and whatnot. He doesn't need Dr. Dre to make solid music. It's obvious, it's been given there that he can do it on his own and with another creative team. He still gives you that West Coast flavor. So with this being said, if you guys follow Game on Instagram or any kind of social media, or you've been keeping up with this album, if you have not heard it, you'll know that it's chock full of features. From Kendrick to Cube to Dre to Ab-Soul to Puffy made some appearances. He didn't do anything serious. It was just a little shout out, some little ad-libs in the background. will.i.am made an appearance on the album. As you guys know, he's a member of Black Eyed Peas. So we all know him as that pop group, that pop rapper, singer kind of guy. But before all that blew up, he was actually kind of like an underground backpacker type of MC. Back in, I don't remember if it was like the early or mid-90s, but before Fergie and all them was signed to him, they were actually doing some pretty decent music. It was more backpackish street music. It wasn't like that pop shit that we've been known from them for like the past decade or so. We also have appearance from Future, so we got some relevant guys other than Kendrick. We got Future on this joint. We even have Kanye and Drake. So this is just disc 1, mind you. So I can't imagine all the other features that we're gonna see on disc 2. I'm not sure if he put out the track listing on iTunes or on Instagram. I have not seen it, so I just can't imagine like who else is gonna make an appearance on this album, bro. Like it's way too many people. This was actually a complaint that people were giving out on his last album, The Year of the Wolf, where in which, in his defense, he said it was a compilation album. It wasn't a solo project, which is cool, because then I guess you could say his last solo album was Jesus Peace, which is personally one of my favorite albums from him. And that's next to The Doctor's Advocate, which is actually this album right here. Probably one of my favorites. I don't know if you can see with the glare. Probably one of my favorite albums because it's so personal. With that being said, the documentary 2 is a tight album. Like, you know, he definitely delivered. Mind you, this is only disc 1, so I really can't give you a full review on the album until disc 2 comes out. But so far, when I'm hearing off this album, I love it. He has some flashback moments, again, taking us back to his essence. So he's talking about his upbringing, like we've heard before in previous music, how he was brought up in a Crip neighborhood, being like the one and only blood member or whatever, and like, I guess his small little block or area, I think it was like Cedar Block or something. A lot of people didn't know that, which kind of like, I'm glad that he mentioned that, because there's so many rappers now like Young Thug and this whack ass dude Stitches, who's calling him out, saying that, well, you're a blood or a Crip, you a pussy, blah blah blah. And it's like, when has Game ever said he was a Crip? From day one, he's always like announced that he was a blood. Since day one, I don't think he's ever mentioned him cripping at all. Like, I don't know what these guys are talking about. The only thing I could reference is him saying that his mom was a Crip, or he grew up in a Crip neighborhood. But so what? Like, I mean, from day one, he came in walking and saying he was a blood. So I don't know what he's talking about. Not that I'm advocating gangbanging and stuff. I'm just saying, through his defense, I don't know what these guys are talking about. I think it's kind of corny in my opinion. We hear references again back from when he was younger. He makes one claim about having to jump over school fences, or jump over backyard fences, and pretty much run in order to get to school. He couldn't just casually walk to school because I guess he was gonna get his ass beat. He was the only blood member in his neighborhood. He didn't even pull out his red rag until he got closer to school to actually pull it out and start flagging, which is some serious shit, especially at his young age. I'm sure he wasn't even in high school. He was probably like maybe a freshman at most when he was doing that, and being like the one blood member in a whole Crip school, Compton City High School. I'm not from LA, so I'm not really familiar with that high school at all. So if you are from LA, or if you are from the area, correct me, because I can only go from what I'm hearing on his music. He makes references from, again, his childhood growing up, which is something that he did on the first documentary. Another thing that I do like about the album is that he gives you samples of songs from the early 90s. So he's got the one joint, Don't Trip, with Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, and will.i.am, who I mentioned earlier, and that song is sampled by Diggable Planets. If you guys don't know who Diggable Planets is, it's that one song, I'm sure you've heard it like at a bar or a club somewhere, where they got that 90s thing where they're like, I'm cool like that. I'm cool like that, cause I'm cool like that. If you haven't heard it, go listen to it, you'll know what I'm talking about. And then go listen to Don't Trip, so you'll see the reference right there, where they pretty much sample that piece. The other song that was sampled from a 90s classic was Standing on Ferraris, which is the one song that I mentioned was featured with Puffy. Again, Puffy did not rap on the verse or whatever. He didn't have his own 16. He was just doing his own little ad-libs towards the end. And the song was sampled by Biggie's Kicking the Door. Kicking the door, waving the 4-4. We all know that song. Alright, so that beat was actually sampled here. So it's very similar, if not the same beat, with a couple different tweaks in there to make it more relevant, or I guess more today sounding. And towards the end of the song, we found out the reason why it's called Standing on Ferraris is because, spoiler alert, Puffy mentions how Game buys him a Ferrari, a red Ferrari, just on a whim, out of nowhere. Some random ass Tuesday, just buys him a Ferrari. And yeah, here you go, Puff. Happy Tuesday. Which is crazy to me, because it's just like, yo, you really got money like that, where you could buy your other rich friends who's probably got more money than you a Ferrari, not even on your birthday, not Christmas. You didn't win anything special, just on a random Tuesday. And that's why it's called Standing on Ferraris. So, yeah. Now, one of my favorite songs on this album is the one track that's produced by DJ Premier called The Documentary 2, which is kind of referenced back to the original documentary. Now, the reason why I say it's one of my favorites is because, as you guys know, or if you don't know, I forgot which video it was I put out where I mentioned that DJ Premier is actually one of my favorite producers of all time. So I put him in the top 5 with like Premier, RZA, Dre, maybe Just Blaze and Kanye. The last 2 is always like, you know, kind of shaky for me. But those 3, Premier, RZA, and what I'll say, Dre, those are always my go-to guys for sure. Premier is kind of like right here, he's on the top. He's always my favorite producer just because he's just, it's just so hip-hop. Like anytime I think of a hip-hop beat, I always think of DJ Premier. And it's, even though it's more East Coast kind of a feel, like it's more of that New York 90s boom bap type of feel, I don't care. Like, I feel like anybody can rock, or maybe not anybody can rock it, but it's just like Game's style of rapping is so heavily influenced by the East Coast. He's mentioned this before. Again, go listen to the first documentary where he mentions Nas' Illmatic, Jay's Reasonable Doubt, again, Biggie's Ready to Die. Of course, he also mentions West Coast classic albums, but you could definitely tell he was influenced by the East Coast a lot, especially Nas. In Doctor's Advocate, he was definitely influenced by Illmatic because he had that New York state of mind. A West Coast guy with a New York state of mind is what they used to say to him in the, I guess as growing up, which he mentioned in Doctor's Advocate. And it's definitely proved right here in the documentary too. The track, not the whole album itself, because of just that beat. Like, he just flowed on it like no other. Now, speaking of flow, the first track that he's got with Kendrick Lamar is fire. Like, his rapid flow, he doesn't do it all the time. Like, Kendrick is known to have that rapid flow. He's not one to do it all the time either, but he does it more often than others. Game, when he does it, I feel like it's something special because it reminds me of Jay. Jay came into the game early into the 90s, possibly late 80s, and he had a type of flow, kind of like Das Effects. If you don't know who Das Effects is, old 90s group, go check them out, and you'll see what I'm talking about as far as the fast flow. Even with Jay-Z's early flow, which is rapid speed, Game can do that. He can do that, but he doesn't do it often. So when he does do it, I just think it's phenomenal. He just kills it every time. So overall, guys, this album was definitely a treat. I loved it. Definitely worth my $8.99 at Best Buy. Not to mention the little cool album cover art. I can't wait to get part 2 so I can get the blue and the red staying right next to each other. I'm kind of going back and forth on the rating system. I don't know if I want to give it a 9.5 or a 10. Honestly, it's somewhere in the middle. I will say it's definitely not my favorite album from the Game. I mean, Game, every rapper, any artist is always going to say their up and coming project is their best ever. Game is no exception. I read somewhere that Dr. Dre said this is going to be the best album in the past 5 years, which is a stretch. Of course you're going to say that, that's your man. But as a hip hop fan and listener, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's the best album in the past 5 years, but it's definitely up there for this year especially, because there's been a lot of music out there, a lot of albums that I've listened to that I had to pass on reviews because I was just going to completely shit on it and I just did not want to do that. Now, with that being said, I don't think it's as good as the documentary. I think the documentary is slightly better. Not to say that this album is bad, but only because the documentary was fresh, it was unique. It was the first time we had seen a West Coast artist in the mainstream in years. So from there, he had, again, Dr. Dre's production, which is phenomenal, and we had an update of what West Coast gangsta life is like, compared to what we saw in the early 90s with Snoop and Dre and whatnot, because things have changed. After that, we didn't see any other West Coast artists for the longest till maybe 2009 or 8, like when Nipsey and them started to bubble, but they still never made it to the mainstream. A lot of West Coast artists are still not really breaking into the mainstream, other than guys like, Black Hippie like Kendrick and Ab-Soul and them. And it's really just Kendrick that's in the mainstream right there. Like, you can't ask the old lady next door who Ab-Soul is, but I'm sure she's gonna know who Kendrick Lamar is, you know what I'm saying? With that being said, it does not have the magic as the first documentary, but it's still a good album. I still love it. Again, I don't know if I want to give it a 9.5 or a 10. It's in there somewhere, But if you have not listened to it, go check it out. It's definitely dope. I loved every second of it. There's not one song on here that makes me want to just go, skip. Now with that being said, this review is not finished because this is only disc 1. Disc 2 comes out next Friday, whereas which I do plan on picking that one up too and doing another vlog of me picking it up at Best Buy. Now, quick warning, I may not be in I will not be in town for next Friday. I'm actually leaving to Texas on Thursday. So if you do want to see the review, let me know in the comments section because I'm obviously not going to be in the shop. I'm going to be in Texas seeing some family. So I don't mind doing a review, but it won't be here. It'll be over there. So if you do want to see that review for next week, let me know in the comments section. Also, let me know how you feel about this album. Did you guys listen to it? And did you like it compared to the first one? What did you guys think? Let me know. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, like, share this video, and I'll see you next time.